The palace stood like a monument of silver stone, shining under the light of two suns. Towers stretched into the sky, their tops piercing the clouds while banners of the royal house fluttered against the warm wind. Guards marched along the walls with spears in hand, and nobles passed through the gates wearing robes of silk. To many, this palace was a symbol of strength and wealth, the heart of a proud kingdom. Yet behind those glittering walls, there was a chamber that stayed quiet. In this chamber lived the king's daughter. Her name was Mira. To the court she was hidden, a secret rarely seen, a shadow behind the golden crown of her father. She was not kept away because of her mind or her heart, but because of the arm she had lost in her youth. Mira had once been a child full of laughter. She had run across the palace gardens with flowers in her hair and joy in her eyes. That joy was changed forever during an accident in the royal hangar. Machines failed, and flames tore through the chamber where she had been playing. Soldiers carried her out alive, but her left arm was gone, taken by fire and steel. The healers of her people were skilled, and they saved her life. They offered her a crafted limb of crystal and metal, but Mira refused it. She did not want to wear a mask for her wound. She believed it would only remind her of what she had lost, not who she still was. From then on, she lived with only one arm, and with that choice came whispers and silence. The king loved his daughter in his own way, but he feared how the court would judge her. Nobles expected perfection from the blood of the throne. They believed that strength must show in body as well as in spirit. The king, wishing to protect his daughter from cruel eyes, ordered that she remain out of sight during great gatherings. She was allowed to walk the gardens, to study in the library, and to watch the skies from her balcony. But she was never presented to visiting rulers. She was a secret within her own home. Mira grew with this silence pressing on her. She was given fine gowns, jewels, and a room filled with treasures, but she would have traded it all for the warmth of companionship. Her maids bowed politely but spoke little beyond duty. The tutors taught her numbers, history, and the stars, but they left once the lessons were done. She had no friends of her own age, no one to sit beside her in laughter or whisper dreams in the night. In the evenings, Mira often sat by her window. From there she could see the city stretched below the palace walls. The streets glowed with lamps and music drifted through the air. Families gathered in the open squares, sharing food and stories. Traders laughed as they sold their goods, and children danced near the fountains. Mira watched them with longing. She wanted to feel the world outside, to walk among those who did not see her as a mark of shame. At times she would press her hand against the window glass and whisper to herself. She wished someone, anyone, could see her not as broken but as whole. She wanted to be known for her thoughts, her dreams, her courage, not for the arm she had lost. One night, as she sat under the pale glow of the twin moons, Mira remembered a story her mother once told her. Her mother had died when she was still young, but her words stayed. She had said that beauty was not in perfect skin or flawless form, but in the fire of the heart. Mira repeated those words like a prayer. She held them close when the loneliness felt like a heavy cloak around her shoulders. The palace was full of noise during the day. Servants hurried along the halls, guards shouted orders, and ministers carried scrolls to the king. Yet for Mira, the hours moved slowly. She filled her time with reading, learning the tales of heroes from long ago. She admired those who rose from hardship, those who carried scars yet walked forward with pride. In those stories, she found a mirror of herself, though no one else seemed to see it. Her father, the king, would visit her at times. He would place his heavy hand on her shoulder and tell her he loved her, though his eyes carried sorrow. He promised that he only wished to keep her safe. Mira nodded, though in her heart she wished for freedom, not safety. She wanted to walk beside her people and prove that she was not weak, but her father could not see this truth. To him, the court was a place of sharp eyes and sharper tongues. He feared they would wound her spirit beyond repair, and so he kept her hidden. The court itself was full of pride. The nobles spoke of wars won and alliances gained. They raised their glasses in praise of strength, beauty, and wealth. They did not speak of pain, nor did they honor scars. In their eyes, Mira's missing arm was not a story of survival, but a mark of imperfection. Mira knew of their whispers. She heard the servants repeat what the nobles said behind closed doors. She felt the sting of their judgment, though they rarely spoke to her face. This knowledge deepened her loneliness, for she feared she would never be accepted. Still, within her heart there was a quiet strength. She carried herself with grace when she walked through the gardens. She studied the stars and dreamed of other worlds beyond her own. She wrote poems in the margins of her books, verses about longing and hope. Though hidden, her spirit refused to vanish. At times, Mira wandered to the old library. It was a vast hall filled with shelves that reached the ceiling. Few visited it, and so it became her refuge. She loved the smell of ancient pages and the silence that wrapped around her there. She read of distant planets, of creatures unlike her own, of humans who had only recently stepped into the wider galaxy. She found those tales fascinating, for humans were known for their resilience. Despite their small place among the stars, they carried courage and abundance. Mira often wondered what it would be like to meet one. The seasons passed, and still her days stayed the same. Her life was a cycle of study, silence, and longing glances from her window. Each time her father hosted guests, she remained in her chamber, listening to the distant echo of feasts and laughter. She sat alone, her candle burning low, her eyes fixed on the stars. She dreamed of a time when someone would look at her and see more than the arm she had lost. She dreamed of a voice that would speak to her without pity or judgment. She dreamed of a heart that would meet her own in honesty. These dreams became the fire that kept her spirit alive. One evening, while walking through the garden, she paused by the fountain. The water shimmered in the moonlight, and the flowers gave off a sweet fragrance. Mira closed her eyes and let the sound of the water calm her. She whispered her hope into the night, though no one was there to hear. She wished for someone to see her true self. She did not know that change was coming. Beyond the palace walls, ships carried envoys across the stars. Among them were humans whose arrival would soon stir the quiet life she had always known. They would bring voices, laughter, and questions that would shift the silence of her world. The kingdom had long guarded its borders. Ships from other worlds rarely entered its skies, and when they did, they were carefully watched. The king believed in strength and control, but he also knew that the galaxy was changing. Old powers were fading, new alliances were forming, and isolation could bring weakness. For that reason, he finally agreed to welcome visitors from the distant blue planet called Earth. News spread quickly through the palace. Servants hurried to polish the halls, and banners were hung across the tall gates. Soldiers stood in perfect rows, their armor shining in the light of the suns. The air buzzed with excitement, for many had never seen a human with their own eyes. Mira heard of this event from her maid. She was sitting by her window when the maid entered with a folded gown. "The king has ordered the palace to prepare," the maid said softly. "Visitors from Earth are coming. It will be a great day of welcome." Mira's heart stirred at the words. She had read about humans in the library. They were not as tall as her people, nor as strong, but their history was filled with endurance. They had survived wars, disasters, and endless struggles on their small world. Yet they still dreamed of stars. She had admired them from afar, and now they were coming here. "Will I see them?" Mira asked, though she already knew the answer. The maid lowered her eyes. "The king has not spoken of it," Mira sighed. She placed her hand on the window and looked out. Beyond the palace walls, she could see the sky routes where ships would soon land. She felt a mix of hope and sadness. Hope because something new was coming. Sadness because she knew she might be kept hidden again. The day of arrival came with the roar of engines. A great silver ship descended from the sky, its hull marked with the crest of Earth's alliance. The people of the city gathered near the palace gates, watching with wide eyes as the vessel touched the landing ground. A ramp lowered, and out stepped the human envoys. They wore formal suits, plain compared to the flowing robes of the nobles, yet neat and proud. Their leader was tall, with gray in his hair, and his voice carried strength when he greeted the king. Behind him walked several younger envoys, men and women chosen to assist in talks and learn about the kingdom. Among them was Paul. Paul was not a soldier nor a noble. He was a simple envoy chosen for his skill in listening and his gift with words. His people believed that true peace was built not by weapons but by understanding. Paul had been sent to speak, to observe, and to form bonds of trust. When he stepped onto the ground of the alien kingdom, he felt a mix of awe and nervousness. The palace towers shone above him, grand and beautiful, unlike anything he had seen on Earth. The air smelled of flowers, and the light of 2 suns gave the sky a golden hue. He whispered to himself, "This place is like a dream." The king greeted the humans with formality. His voice was deep, his presence commanding. He led them through the palace gates, while nobles followed behind, their eyes sharp and curious. Feasts were prepared in the great hall with tables heavy with fruits, bread, and roasted meats. Music filled the air as dancers moved across the floor. Mira was not there. She remained in her chamber, listening to the sound of drums from afar. Her father had not called for her, and she sat in silence, feeling once more like a ghost within her own home. She longed to see the visitors, to hear their voices, to know if the humans were as brave and kind as the stories claimed. Later that evening, when the feast was still alive with laughter, Mira slipped quietly into the garden. The moonlight washed over the flowers and the fountain shimmered with silver. She walked along the path, her thoughts heavy with longing. At the same time, Paul had asked for a moment to step away from the noise of the hall. He told his companions he wished to see the palace gardens, and with the king's permission he was guided outside. The guard left him near the entrance, allowing him to wander within the walls. Paul walked slowly, admiring the strange plants and glowing blossoms. He touched a leaf that shone with faint blue light and smiled. "Even the plants here seem alive with magic," he said softly. It was then he saw her. Mira stood by the fountain, her long gown flowing like water, her hair touched by the moon. She had not noticed him at first, for her eyes were fixed on the stars above. She whispered to herself, repeating the words her mother once told her about beauty of the heart. Paul froze, not wanting to disturb her, but the sound of his step on the stone path made her turn. Their eyes met. For a moment both were silent. Mira felt her breath catch. She had not expected anyone here, least of all one of the human visitors. She thought of running, hiding as she always had, but something in his gaze stopped her. He did not stare at her missing arm. He did not look away in pity. His eyes were calm, curious, and kind. Paul bowed his head slightly. "I am sorry if I disturb you," he said in a gentle tone. "I wish to see the gardens. They are beautiful, like nothing I have known." Mira hesitated, then answered softly, "Yes, they are beautiful." Her voice was quiet, but Paul heard the sadness within it. He stepped closer, keeping his movements slow so as not to alarm her. "I am Paul, envoy of Earth. May I ask your name?" She lowered her eyes, unsure if she should speak. Few outside the court even knew she existed, yet something in his voice felt safe. "My name is Mira," she whispered. Paul smiled. "Mira, that is a name with grace." Silence followed, but it was not heavy. The sound of water and night birds filled the space between them. Mira felt her heart beat faster. This human had spoken her name with respect, not pity. She studied him quietly. His clothes were simple, his frame not as strong as the warriors of her people, yet there was steadiness in him. "You are the king's daughter, are you not?" Paul asked gently. Mira nodded. "Yes, though I am not often seen." Paul tilted his head. "That is a shame. You deserve to be seen." The words struck her deeply. She had dreamed of hearing them, yet never thought anyone would say them aloud. She looked at him, searching his face for mockery, but found none. He spoke with honesty. "Why do you hide in the garden instead of joining the feast?" Paul asked kindly. Mira hesitated. She could not tell him the whole truth, not yet. Instead, she said, "The garden is quiet." "I like the quiet," Paul nodded. "I understand. Sometimes quiet is better than noise." They stood together under the moonlight, two souls from different worlds. Yet for that moment they felt close. Mira felt a warmth in her chest she had not known before. Paul, too, sensed that this meeting was not by chance. The sound of guards calling echoed from the hall, reminding Paul that he must return. He bowed to her once more. "It was an honor to meet you, Mira. I hope we may speak again." Mira whispered, "Yes." As he walked away, she touched her chest, feeling her heart still racing. For the first time in many years, she did not feel invisible. She watched him leave and whispered to herself, "He saw me." That night, Mira did not sit alone in sorrow. She sat with a quiet hope, replaying the moment in her mind. The human envoy had not looked at her wound, but at her spirit, and in that gaze she felt truly alive. The palace returned to its busy rhythm after the grand feast. The humans were welcomed with respect, and every day new meetings were held between the king and his guests. Ministers discussed trade, resources, and paths of peace. Guards escorted the envoys through the great halls, and nobles followed them with sharp eyes, curious about the strangers from Earth. Yet behind the walls of duty and politics, something else had begun. A quiet bond was forming between Mira and Paul, a bond that no minister or noble had planned. Mira thought of him constantly, She remembered the way he had looked at her without judgment, how his voice had carried kindness rather than pity. For years she had dreamed of such a moment but never believed it could be real. Now she carried the memory like a small flame in her heart, warming her loneliness. Paul also could not forget the princess he had met in the garden. He had expected to see warriors, nobles, and rulers in the palace, but instead he found someone hidden in shadows who spoke with gentle honesty. Mira's presence had touched him deeply. He felt she carried a strength that others did not notice. He wanted to see her again, not as an envoy to a kingdom, but as a friend. The chance came sooner than expected. One afternoon, Paul asked a guard if he might walk once more in the gardens. The guard agreed, thinking nothing of it, for many envoys enjoyed the sights of the palace grounds. Paul walked alone, his steps steady and his eyes searching. And there, by the fountain, he found Mira again. She stood with a book in her hand, her hair shining in the sunlight. When she saw him, her heart leapt, but she kept her voice calm. "You returned," she said softly. Paul smiled. "I hoped I would see you." They spoke quietly at first, words like gentle ripples on water. Paul asked her about the flowers, and Mira explained their names. She asked about Earth, and he told her of green forests, blue oceans, and mountains covered with snow. Her eyes lit with wonder, for she had read of such things but never heard them spoken with such warmth. Day after day their meetings continued. Sometimes they met in the gardens, sometimes in the old library where few dared to go. They shared stories of their worlds, their dreams, and their fears. Mira confessed how she felt hidden by her father, how the court judged her by the arm she had lost. She spoke of her longing to be seen. Paul listened with full heart. He told her that scars were not weakness but proof of survival. He told her that on Earth many honored those who carried marks of struggle, for it showed they had faced hardship and still endured. Mira listened with wide eyes as if each word was a gift. "You are not broken," Paul said one evening. "You are strong, stronger than many who walk proudly in the halls outside." Mira felt tears rise, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She whispered, "Thank you." The friendship grew in secret like a seed hidden in the soil. It was fragile, yet it carried the power to grow into something greater. Mira laughed more than before. She no longer sat only in silence, for she now had memories to hold close. Paul, too, felt lighter. The burden of politics was heavy, but the moments with Mira gave him joy and strength. Still, secrets cannot remain hidden forever. The court began to notice changes in the princess. Servants whispered that she smiled more, that she walked with a light in her eyes. Some guessed that she had found a companion. Whispers turned to suspicion when guards reported that the human envoy often walked in the gardens at strange hours. One minister, sharp and proud, brought the matter to the king. "Your Majesty," he said, "I fear that your daughter is meeting with the human in secret. Such a bond is dangerous. It could shame the throne." The king frowned. His heart was torn. He wished to protect his daughter, yet he feared the anger of his court. He ordered that the guards watch more closely, though he gave no command to end the meetings at once. Mira did not know of these whispers. She continued to meet Paul, trusting in the small world they had built together. One night in the library, she showed him a book she had written herself. It was filled with poems about stars, loneliness, and hope. Paul read the words slowly, his voice steady. When he finished, he looked at her with admiration. "These are beautiful. They show your soul." Mira lowered her eyes. "No one else has read them?" "Then I am honored," Paul said. "Thank you for sharing them with me." For Mira, those words meant more than any treasure. She felt, perhaps for the first time, that someone truly saw her heart. But outside the quiet halls, tension was rising. Some nobles disliked the humans. They saw them as weak, unworthy of alliance. They whispered that the humans sought only to take from the kingdom. And when they learned of the bond between Mira and Paul, they saw a chance to use it as proof. One evening, while Mira and Paul spoke in the garden, a shadow moved among the trees. A court advisor watched them, his eyes cold. He heard their laughter, saw the way they looked at each other, and turned away with plans forming in his mind. The next day, the advisor spoke in the council chamber. "The king's daughter gives her heart to a human," he declared. "What will the people say if their princess chooses one not of their kind? What will other rulers think if we mix royal blood with an outsider?" The chamber filled with murmurs. Some agreed, some stayed silent, but all knew the matter was dangerous. The king did not answer at once. He remembered his daughter's sorrow, her years of silence, and how he had hidden her away. His heart ached, for he wanted her happiness, but he feared the anger of his court. He chose to wait, to watch, to see what would come. Meanwhile, Mira and Paul remained unaware of the storm building around them. They walked through the gardens and spoke under the stars, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Mira no longer hid her missing arm when she stood with him. Paul never looked at it with pity. Instead, he looked at her eyes, her smile, her spirit. One night, Mira asked him, "Why do you not stare as others do? Why do you not see me as less?" Paul answered simply, "Because you are not less. You are whole. You are more than what is missing. You are you, and that is enough." Her heart trembled at his words. She knew then that what she felt was no longer only friendship. It was something deeper, something she had never dared to dream. The secret friendship was no longer only a comfort. It was becoming a light, strong enough to challenge the shadows of the court. The tension in the palace had grown heavier with each passing day. Whispers of the princess's secret meetings with the human envoy Paul had reached the ears of the king's advisors. Some wanted immediate action, fearing scandal and loss of respect among neighboring kingdoms. Others saw the human as harmless, but they were few. Mira remained unaware of the rising storm. She continued her secret walks with Paul in the gardens, sharing stories and dreams. Each meeting brought laughter and light to her life. She felt alive in a way she had never known, and she trusted Paul more than anyone in the palace. One morning, the palace gates sounded an alarm. Guards rushed through the halls and ministers gathered in the council chamber. The king called his advisors together urgently. "Reports have come of a human plotting against the kingdom," a minister said, his voice sharp. "It is said that one of them seeks to gain influence over the princess for their own gain." The king's face darkened. He had always tried to protect Mira from harm, but now he felt the danger close. He knew she was fragile in the eyes of the court, yet strong in spirit. The thought of someone harming her heart or reputation made his stomach tighten. "I will handle this carefully," he said. "Do not act rashly." Meanwhile, Paul had been summoned by the king. He was led to a quiet chamber, and the king spoke with calm authority. "Paul, I've heard troubling reports," the king said. "Some believe you wish to influence my daughter for reasons beyond friendship. I need to know your intentions." Paul met the king's gaze without fear. "Your Majesty, I respect your daughter and your kingdom. I have no desire to harm or control her. I wish only to be her friend, to see her as she truly is. I do not seek power or influence, only trust and honesty." The king studied him. He saw truth in the young human's eyes, yet the whispers of the court weighed heavily. "You must prove that your words are true," the king said. "If you value my daughter, you will act to show your loyalty, even at risk to yourself." Paul bowed. "I will do whatever is needed." Later that day, a dangerous plot unfolded. A small group of traitors within the palace sought to kidnap the princess, using the cover of night and confusion among the guards. They believed that capturing her would force the king to act in their favor. Paul had been warned by a loyal servant who admired his courage. Without hesitation, he rushed to Mira's chamber. He found her asleep, the soft glow of the moon lighting her face. He whispered urgently, "Mira, wake up. You must come with me." She opened her eyes, startled, but she trusted him instantly. She followed him silently through hidden corridors and secret passages, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly. The air was tense, filled with the danger of discovery, yet Mira felt a strange calm. Paul was with her, and that made her brave. Outside the chamber, the conspirators moved quickly, breaking through doors and corridors. Paul anticipated their path, leading Mira through passages few knew existed. They avoided guards and traps, moving with skill and care. At one point, a guard nearly caught them. Paul's quick thinking saved them, using shadows and quiet steps to slip past detection. Mira's heart pounded, but she did not falter. She realized that she was not helpless. Her years of solitude had taught her patience, observation, and quiet courage. She followed Paul faithfully, knowing that together they could face the danger. Finally, they reached the outer garden. The cool night air filled their lungs, and the stars above seemed brighter than ever. Yet danger was not gone. The conspirators had discovered their escape and moved to block their path. Paul turned to Mira. "Stay close to me," he said firmly. "I will protect you." Mira nodded, gripping his arm. She realized how much she had come to rely on his strength, not only of body but of heart. The conspirators approached, but Paul did not falter. He stood in front of Mira, speaking loudly. "Leave her be. She is under my protection, and I will not allow harm to come to her." The guards heard the commotion and rushed to assist. In the chaos, the conspirators were captured. The king arrived soon after, his face a mixture of anger and relief. He saw Mira unharmed standing beside Paul, and he felt a swell of pride. "You have proven yourself," the king said to Paul, "not only with courage but with loyalty. You risked yourself to protect my daughter, and for that you have earned trust." Mira looked at her father, her heart full. She had feared that her life was meant only for hiding, but now she realized she could stand in the light, and that those who valued her would see her strength. The court, too, witnessed Paul's bravery. Whispers turned to admiration. The human envoy, once doubted, was now honored for his courage. Nobles who had scorned the bond between Mira and Paul had no choice but to respect the loyalty and heart shown. That night, in the quiet of the garden, Mira and Paul sat together. The fountain shimmered under the moonlight and the stars sparkled above. "You saved me," Mira said softly. Paul shook his head. "We saved each other. You were brave too. Without your courage, I could not have succeeded." Mira smiled, a new confidence rising within her. "I never thought anyone would see me as strong. I always thought I was too small, too broken." "You are not broken," Paul said firmly. "You are whole. Your strength is not in what is missing, but in what you carry inside." For the first time, Mira felt truly seen. The loneliness that had shadowed her life seemed lighter. She realized that courage, honesty, and love could shine even in the darkest places. She looked at Paul and felt a deep connection, a bond forged not only by danger but by understanding and respect. The king, watching from his balcony, saw his daughter standing tall and proud. He felt both relief and admiration. He had hidden her for so long, thinking it was protection. But now he understood that she was capable of more than he had imagined. The human envoy had not only protected her, but had opened her heart to trust, friendship, and perhaps love. In the days that followed, Mira began to move more freely within the palace. She still met Paul in secret at times, but now she also ventured into the halls where the court gathered. The whispers were quieter, replaced with cautious respect. Mira discovered that when she stood with courage and honesty, the court could not diminish her spirit. Paul remained by her side, guiding, teaching, and sharing the wisdom of his people. He showed Mira that scars are a story of survival, not shame, and that love is built on trust and understanding, not appearances. Together they navigated the delicate paths of politics, danger, and friendship, learning from each other and growing stronger. The trial of trust had passed, and Mira had survived not only because of Paul's courage but because of her own. She realized that the world was not only a place of rules and expectations, but a place where hearts could connect, where bravery could shine, and where love could grow in the unlikeliest of places. That night, Mira looked at the twin moons above and whispered a promise to herself. She would no longer hide. She would face the world with her heart open, her spirit strong, and her courage unwavering. And with Paul beside her, she knew she could face anything that came. The palace had changed since the night of danger. The threat of the conspirators was gone, and the court had seen proof of Paul's loyalty. Whispers had turned into cautious admiration. Mira walked through the halls with a new sense of confidence. She felt the eyes of the nobles on her. Yet instead of fear or shame, she felt respect. They saw her courage, her resilience, and the quiet strength that had always been hers, though hidden. Mira's father, the king, had spent long hours in thought. He had protected his daughter for so many years, believing he was keeping her safe. Now he realized that protection alone could not make her strong. She had found her own strength, guided by trust, friendship, and the courage to face the world. He watched her from his balcony one evening as she walked with Paul in the palace garden, their hands brushing lightly, smiles lighting their faces. The king felt pride swell within him. She had become more than a hidden princess. She had become a symbol of hope. The people of the kingdom had noticed the change as well. When Mira began to appear at events, though cautiously at first, they saw a princess who did not hide her arm, who walked with grace and dignity. Mothers whispered to their children that true beauty was not in perfection, but in courage and heart. Children smiled at her presence, inspired by her resilience. And the nobles, once critical, began to understand that the princess was no mere figurehead, but a living example of strength and honor. One morning, Mira awoke early and looked out over the city. The streets were alive with merchants, dancers, and laughter. She felt a sense of freedom she had never known. Paul, already waiting near the fountain, waved to her. She descended the palace steps quickly, her gown brushing softly against the stones. "Good morning," Paul said, smiling. "Are you ready for today?" Mira laughed lightly. "I think I am. I feel ready for many things now." They walked together through the palace gardens, talking about the city, the stars, and the stories of their worlds. Mira realized that she no longer felt the constant weight of loneliness. Paul had become more than a friend. He was a companion who had seen her true self and valued it, and in return she had opened her heart to him fully. That afternoon, the king invited Paul to a formal audience in the great hall. The nobles were seated and the banners hung with the colors of the royal house. The humans stood in their modest attire, contrasting with the elaborate robes of the court, yet carrying a quiet dignity that drew attention. Mira followed, her hand lightly touching Paul's. She felt calm, confident. She would stand in the light and show the world who she truly was. The king rose from his throne and addressed the court. "My daughter has faced danger and adversity with courage. She has found a friend who has proven his loyalty and honor. Together they have taught us that strength is not in appearance but in heart. Let this be a lesson to all who dwell in this kingdom." Mira stepped forward. She lifted her gaze to the nobles and spoke clearly. "I am no longer afraid to be seen. I will not hide what I am, for it is who I am. My arm, my scars, my experiences, they are mine and they do not make me weak. They make me strong." A silence fell over the hall. Then slowly the nobles began to nod, some murmuring words of approval. The people watching from the balconies below cheered softly, and Mira felt a wave of warmth in her chest. She had faced judgment and fear, and had come through with honesty and courage. Paul stepped beside her and took her hand. "You are stronger than any of us imagined," he said softly. Mira smiled, her eyes shining. "And you helped me see it." From that day forward, Mira and Paul were seen together openly. They walked through the palace gardens, attended council meetings, and visited the people of the city. The children adored Mira, running to her and listening as she told stories of stars, distant planets, and brave heroes. The adults were inspired by her courage, learning that scars and loss could coexist with beauty and strength. The king finally felt a peace he had not known for many years. He watched his daughter grow into her role not as a hidden princess but as a symbol of resilience and hope. He realized that the love she found, first in friendship and then perhaps more, was part of the gift of life itself. One evening, Mira and Paul walked to the highest tower of the palace. The twin moons shone brightly above, casting silver light over the city below. Mira leaned on the balcony, feeling the wind against her face. "Do you ever imagine what life would have been like if we had not met?" she asked. Paul shook his head. "I cannot. Meeting you was inevitable. It is how the universe chose to teach both of us about courage, trust, and heart." Mira laughed lightly, a sound like wind chimes in the night. "Then I am glad it happened. I am glad you saw me for who I truly am." He turned to her, his expression serious yet gentle. "And I am glad I saw you. You are more beautiful than any story, more courageous than any legend. You are Mira." Her heart lifted at his words. She realized that beauty was not in perfection, nor in appearances. It was in honesty, in courage, and love that sees the heart and spirit above all else. Over the following months, the kingdom adjusted to the new reality. Humans and aliens worked together in trade, in study, and in celebration. Mira and Paul's bond became a symbol of harmony, showing that understanding and respect could unite even the most different of worlds. Mira no longer felt hidden. She spoke at council meetings, shared her knowledge of the stars and distant worlds, and advised the king on matters of peace and diplomacy. She walked among her people with confidence, knowing that her strength came from within. Paul remained at her side, not as a ruler, but as a partner, a friend, and perhaps more. They explored the kingdom together, learning from each other, teaching each other, and growing in trust and respect. Their bond was admired by all, showing that love and friendship could flourish even in the most unexpected places. One bright morning, Mira and Paul visited the city squares, where the people had gathered for a festival. Children ran to greet them, adults offered smiles, and the music of celebration filled the air. Mira laughed freely, no longer weighed down by fear or judgment. She felt alive, truly alive. And for the first time in many years, she felt that she belonged fully to her world and to herself. She looked at Paul, who held her hand gently, and felt a sense of completeness. Their journey had begun in secret, born from courage and trust. Now it had grown into something enduring, something that could not be hidden, something that could not be broken. The palace, once a place of shadows for her, had become a home filled with light, friendship, and hope. Mira realized that her life was no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had found: courage, trust, love, and a place in the world where she could stand tall. As the sun set and the twin moons rose, Mira and Paul stood on the balcony looking over the kingdom. The city glowed softly beneath them, and the stars above promised endless possibilities. Mira took a deep breath and whispered, "This is a new beginning." Paul squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, and it is ours to shape together." Mira smiled, feeling her heart full. She had faced loneliness, judgment, and danger. She had learned that courage and trust could light the darkest nights. She had discovered that true beauty is found not in perfection, but in the heart that dares to hope, to love, and to stand tall. And so, with the kingdom watching, with hearts united in hope, and with a bond that had been tested by fire and strengthened by honesty, Mira stepped forward into her new life. She was no longer the lonely princess hidden in shadows. She was a symbol of courage, a princess of resilience, and a woman who had learned to embrace herself fully. And by her side was Paul, the human who had seen her true beauty, who had respected her scars, and who had loved her for the strength of her heart. Together they walked into the future, ready to face all that life could offer, and to shape a world where understanding, courage, and love were more powerful than fear. The palace towers glowed in the light of the twin moons, reflecting the joy and hope of a kingdom renewed. Mira's heart was no longer heavy with loneliness. It was filled with trust, love, and the knowledge that she was seen, truly seen for the first time. This was the beginning of a life that would shine far beyond the walls of the palace. A life that proved that even in a world of judgment, fear and doubt, courage and love could prevail, and so, the lonely princess who had once hidden in shadows became a beacon of hope, a symbol of strength and a queen of her own destiny, standing proudly with the human who had loved her for who she truly was.